Video games from 77. Video games from 1977 to 1983 were huge, like generating $5 billion, huge. But if you look at the games themselves, they didn't look very interesting, but they were still massively popular. Aside from the addictive nature of getting a high score, the games usually got a lot of attention because they're really easy to understand. I mean, you look at Pong, you move the thing, bounce, you get a point. You look at Galaga, you move the ship, shoot the other ships, get a point. And a quick understanding is all it takes to hold the player. The quicker they understand something, the quicker they understand the challenges, the quicker they can develop strategies. Strategies like shooting through your cover in Space Invaders, or strategies like saving the big dots for the last in Pac-Man. And though playing strategically can be really awesome, it can get pretty stale. I mean, depending on what you're doing, but in this case, we're getting a high score. And of course, people were getting high scores over and over and over, and it gets boring. In 1983, there was a gigantic crash where people stopped caring about video games. Companies like Atari ended up filing a $500 million loss. Pretty insane. But if you think about it, if people got tired of video games, why didn't they play more interesting video games? I mean, it's not like this was the only kind of game that there was. I mean, there was other games, there was more complex ones. The FS1 Flight Simulator, there was Ultima 1, Microsoft Adventure, stuff like that. No, I think nobody wanted to get into more complex games because you have to study. You literally have to take out a manual and read how to play the game before you start doing it. And nobody wanted to do that. I mean, look at this. I mean, what do I don't even know what I do. I know I walk. Okay, do I gotta talk to people? Wait, how do I talk? It wasn't until 1985 that this dude developed a game called Super Mario Brothers. That game, along with the NES, contributed to such a massive increase in popularity of video games that the NES was said to be in 30% of American homes in 1990. But Super Mario Brothers wasn't very simple. I mean, it was a pretty complex game. You had multiple levels with tons of variations of challenges. So why was it so popular? Well, it was because it was designed to be approachable. It was designed to teach the player how to play the game as they played it. You didn't need to read a manual. You could just play the first level and suddenly know how to play the game. And this became super popular. Games started actually integrating this kind of teach as you play mechanism, and it massively increased the approachability of games altogether. But not all developers decided to take this approachable design in their game. This is Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure. This was developed for DOS in 1992. On the surface, the game looks pretty inviting. You know, there's a cartoonish atmosphere, you have a little green alien, there's pretty basic platforming play. But as you play the game, you kind of understand it's not really designed for approachability. We're going to look at two parts of this game, what I call the exterior and the interior. The exterior will be the graphics and the sound. Interior will be more about game design. When you look at Super Mario Brothers, it's pretty easy to understand where you are in relation to everything else around you. Mario pops out from the background, and even though the game has a limited palette of basically brown and green, you can still see where Mario is. He pops out against the bright blue sky, and he pops out against the dark black cave. Same with platforms. When you look at the platforms, wherever you're running to, they pop out. You know where you're gonna go. It's your fault if you fall off a platform because you can easily see where everything is. Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure, however, is very colorful, very, very colorful. Like the backgrounds kind of blend in with the foreground elements. So what happens is you kind of lose track of things because they're the same color as the background. These trees have branches that blend in with the background, so I'm not exactly sure where to jump next. This fire pipe looks like it's part of the background element, but nope, that hurts you. In this level, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be inside of a monster, which is awesome. You can see the whole guts in the background, but it makes it really hard to see everything. When you have to keep the basic concept of the game in your mind and consciously have to look out for it, it makes the game harder to play. And I don't mean hard like in difficulty, it just makes it hard to keep going and hard to keep reorienting yourself and try to figure out where things are. There's only 2 levels in this game that feel like they don't do that. There's this one in the sky and this one in a cave. Really, every level should have been that way, but it was just those 2. Sound effects are a very important thing in games. They create associations between you and objects. You know in Super Mario Brothers that this box is giving you a coin because you hear that sound. You understand that when you're hurt, versus when you die. You know when you're running out of time. You know when you've dealt damage to an enemy. And you know when you've obtained one up. So every time you know when things are happening and you don't need to second guess anything. In Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure, there is a lot of sound, and it's mostly confusing, not the sounds that they use, but the way they choose to use them. You get a sound effect when you hop on an enemy, when you get hurt, or when you collect a bonus object. That makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is when you walk, you have sound effects of your footsteps. And these things dripping off the pipes make sounds. I'm just not entirely sure why. Collecting bombs makes the same sound as collecting a bonus object. Imagine if Mario did the same thing with coins. It would make the association feel different, feel weird. Some of the sounds sound similar, so you kind of have to figure out exactly what happened. These little flower enemies make a sound when they attack, because when they don't make a sound, they don't hurt you. But then they also make the sound off screen. Sometimes you have to figure out, well, was that the flower enemy? Did I get hurt? Did I pick up a bonus object? Because they all kind of sound the same. This level has sounds with thunder in the background. And it's kind of cool, but it kind of muddies up the sound and kind of misplaces your associations. Again, you have to second guess yourself. So when you don't have these sound associations all the time, the game is harder to internalize, which means that the game feels like it's a little less under your control. And gameplay that doesn't feel like it's under your control kind of feels like you're watching a movie with blurry vision. Like you still understand what's going on, but it's much harder. Enemies in Super Mario Bros. Are pretty simple. Goombas move one way, and if they come to a gap, then they fall off. If they bump into something, they move the other way. Koopas move one way. Koopas with wings bounce. Red Koopas don't fall off a platform. They're all pretty easy to understand as soon as you see them. In Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure, well, we have these little red guys that move around. And they're basically like Goombas in Mario, except they have this element of randomness to them, where they sit and then they look around and then they keep going. And it happens randomly, so sometimes it can happen a few times in a row, and sometimes it doesn't happen at all. What this does is it makes it really hard to understand what these guys are gonna do. Another enemy that uses this is these blue rolling ball guys. They parachute down, and then when they land, they stop there and they wait for you to come onto the same plane as them, and then once you are in the same plane, then they roll in either left or right. But sometimes they don't. It's so strange, again, because you have to figure out what's gonna happen. It creates situations that really feel unfair. Usually I would say randomness in enemies is actually pretty interesting because it creates a different kind of dynamic between the player and the enemy. But I think Super Mario Bros. Does it a little bit better. If you look at the Hammer Brothers in Mario or Bowser, you can see that they have elements of randomness. In Hammer Brothers, they throw their hammers in random intervals, but you can still, judge the amount of time that the hammer takes to curve and then stop. Same with Bowser. Whenever he jumps, it takes some time to understand, but you can understand that when he jumps, that's the time to go underneath him. These kinds of enemies are designed so that Mario will stop in its tracks and then continue very cautiously. Imagine if Goombas did the same thing. It would make the game unreasonably difficult. The choice Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure made to introduce randomness in the enemies doesn't introduce any different strategy, it just kind of makes it aggravating. It implies that the movement was more or less to trick the player, which is not fun at all. In Super Mario Bros., you have Koopas that take 2 hits to destroy. It creates kind of a strategy, kind of like a different way to approach these enemies. You would approach them differently than you would approach other enemies. In Super Mario World, you have ones like the bonsai bills here. Stomp on them once, but then once they're squashed, they run faster. Or these little Goomba-like creatures where you bounce on them once and then they flip upside down. Again, it creates like a different dynamic. But in Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure, you have enemies that take several hits, but they don't do anything. There's these blue ghost things where you can bounce on them, but then you just have to stay there and keep bouncing on them to destroy them. Same with these pea shooter guys. They take 3 hits. It just kind of takes time there's no real strategy involved. Sometimes these enemies are used interestingly. So like with the blue ghost guys, in a certain part of a level, they're used to climb certain areas so that if you can bounce on them, then you get around much easier. But if you kill them accidentally, you don't get to move anymore. It creates a really interesting platforming dynamic, but as far as I know, that's the only place that happens. This is such a subtle thing, but it's so important for platformers. In Super Mario Bros., when you're going forward, the screen never lets you pass 40% of it, so that you always have this 60% that you're looking at. It's so that you can understand where you're gonna go, even when you're running. See the enemies in front of you, you can see platforms or gaps in front of you. You never feel like information was hidden from you. However, Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure has a different kind of feel, understandably so, because it does have a different mechanic. And Cosmo can climb up walls, so naturally you're going to explore upwards a lot. How they do this is they keep Cosmo in more or less the middle of the screen, but the way they do it is kind of strange. Cosmo can be very far to the left or very far to the right, creating these really weird situations where you have to go to the right, but you can't really see what's in front of you. They do, however, have a looking mechanic in this game where you can look above you or look below you, which makes sense for this kind of gameplay, because if you have to go up and you can't see, then it feels unfair. So yeah, the looking mechanic. But you can't look right or left, so those things feel a little bit more unfair. This happens a lot in this game, but specifically there was this one part where I climb up this tower and then I have to go to the right. Now, what's weird about this is that because the screen lead room is so tiny, it hides things from me on the right side. So when I jump, I'm kind of just taking a leap of faith and hoping that I'm gonna land on a platform. And so I'm more or less okay with that because it creates some sort of interesting challenge. But when I do that, specifically in this case, there's an invisible enemy that pushes you off of that platform. Now, that wouldn't be so bad if I could know that the enemy was there. You can see that the enemy has a little outline, so you can spot him usually when he's around. But the enemy doesn't actually spawn, doesn't actually appear until the screen gets over there. So that means every time that I've died on this level, I have to come back and do that same challenge knowing that he's gonna push me off. I just can't get around it. It makes it seem, again, as if they're trying to trick me. And it just feels weird, it feels unfair, it doesn't feel fun. Super Mario Bros. Is an action platformer, so it doesn't really have any puzzles. Other games like Metroid are puzzle platformers, where you have to collect certain things that are scattered throughout and, go certain places, backtrack and stuff. You're not only going in one direction. What's really specific here in Metroid is that the doors open when you shoot them, and you understand that from the very beginning. But then there's other doors that are differently colored, and you know that because they're a different color and because you can't shoot it and it won't open, that something else must make this door open. So then you go looking for that something else to complete the puzzle. You find a weapon, you open the door, and suddenly you've completed the puzzle. Hooray for you. But when you look at a puzzle like this in Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure, they don't seem to want to teach you anything. In this one specific level, you're floating around on this little gizmo, and you come to a point where you can't go forward anymore. It's blocked by like this lightning stuff. And it doesn't look like you're supposed to get on the other side, it's just there, and it makes you think, okay, well, I gotta find a different way around. So you go to find a different way around, and then you find this lever, and you're like, okay, well, I've never seen that before, maybe I'll try to interact with the lever. And when you do that, suddenly the lightning comes off. And, okay, hold on a second. That lever right there, what the f***? I'm supposed to hop on this lever, obviously, but there's spikes above it. Why are there spikes above it? Am I supposed to not hit the lever? Do I drop bombs by the lever? No, I'm definitely supposed to hit it. Why do they put spikes above the lever? That doesn't make any sense. You suddenly realize because you stepped on the lever, all these lightning bolts turned off, and you're like, oh, that must mean that the place is open now. Which is fine, but that's not a puzzle. When you're not taught about the puzzle beforehand, it just kind of feels like a random coincidence. It doesn't feel like really anything interesting happened. You suddenly realize something as opposed to going to find out something specifically. I previously mentioned that Super Mario Bros. Was incredibly designed. It was designed for approachability, which means it was teaching the player as the player plays the game, and it does this really geniusly. In just the first few seconds of the game, you understand how to play basically all of it. You start on the left side of the screen with all this room to your right, meaning you naturally want to walk to the right, and now you understand that you must advance by going to the right. The first enemy starts on the same plane as you, meaning the only way to get around him without dying is by jumping. And now you know how to avoid enemies. These glowing question blocks are located right at jumping height, which creates this curious nature of hitting them when you jump. The mushroom that comes out goes to the right, the same direction you're walking, which is the opposite direction from the enemies, which makes it feel like it's something else. It must be something different. You have very little time before it touches you, and boom, suddenly you understand you have power-ups. The first pipe has enemies right below it, and it has a big enough gap to discourage jumping completely over it, meaning you probably will land on an enemy, and now you know how to destroy enemies. So now, just within the first few seconds of the game, you know how to play the entire game. Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure doesn't really design itself this way. It kinda does, which is really strange. It uses these bonus objects. Okay, hold on a second. Super Mario Bros. Has collectibles in its game because they serve a purpose. You have coins, and you can get 100 coins, and it'll give you an extra life. In Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure, there are collectibles, these bonus objects that give you points when you collect them. And it seems like they're really important because they are everywhere. And each different object is designed differently, and each one has a different point value attached. So they must be used for something. But they're not. Okay, so maybe when you collect a bunch of points, you get lives. Well, no, because there's actually no lives in this game. Okay, well maybe when you deplete your points completely, then you have a game over, so that's why you need to collect them. Well, no, actually when you die and you have 0 points, you just start over with 0 points. Okay, well they must be used for something. Maybe they increase your health. Nope, turns out cheeseburgers do that. Okay, well they must, there's a bonus stage, right? You must be able to use them for a bonus stage. No, actually bonus stars are used to get to the bonus stage. So why do you increase your score at all? What's the point? You can get on a leaderboard, but that leaderboard is only seen by you, so... Anyway, bonus objects are used to lead the player into certain directions. Instead of designing the levels so that they kind of lead the player where they want them to go, they use bonus objects to lead the player in certain paths so that they, teach the player certain things. And in some way, this is actually interesting design because the player will follow these bonus objects in a line and they'll find out what's at the end of that line. So for example, there's these curves where you follow the bonus objects and then you land on another platform, which means, oh cool, I didn't know I could ascend to other platforms and it looks like I can, so that's pretty cool. Or there's times where you follow these objects and you land on an enemy, and so now you know, oh, that's how I kill enemies, is by landing on them. But then designs like these have follies, because when you put the objects almost anywhere, now you've created this association that I must follow these objects. So there's bonus stars here, and they're falling, so I'm gonna try to collect them. Nope, okay, that just leads me to my death. Well, how about these bonus objects right here? I collect, nope. I fall, nope. Okay, and these bonus objects, those go straight down. It's like, it really does feel like they're trying to trick you. I mean, maybe they're not, but it really feels that way. It makes you want to approach everything very cautiously, to the point to where you can miss hints and miss secrets. Because maybe they're trying to lead you to a secret, but you're not so sure you really trust what's at the end of that thing. So when you create a distrust between the player and the game itself, you create a really strange relationship. Just because Cosmo's Cosmic Adventure is not designed to be approachable doesn't mean it's a bad game, it just means it's not approachable. There's certainly lots of other games that are designed not to be approachable, but people still love them. So with this game, like every other game, you can learn the rules and try to be acquainted with them. And if you have the game for a long time, specifically if you have this game and no other games at the time, say because it was 1990 and this is the only game you have on your computer and it's free, as soon as you play it and you keep playing it and keep playing it and keep playing it for a long time, you start to get acquainted with the rules and it becomes interesting, it becomes fun. And it's because it is a game, after all. It's not, trying to push you away. I did have certain fun with this game because, I played a lot of it. I played an episode and a half, something like, 18 levels or something. Collecting bonus objects was fun for me, because they do make sparkly sounds, and you can blow up these hint markers to get like a lot of points. The climbing mechanic is really fun because it looks really silly, but it also, is fun to just keep pressing that button and make them go up really fast. And even sometimes, I liked doing the puzzles because I understood the relationship after finding out what it was all about. The thing I'm trying to convey here is that not all games need to be designed to be approachable. They don't have to be approachable. It's just appreciated when they are. My coffee is very cold.